Hello and welcome to Pandoradom. This is your host, Miles Gray, and my co-host.
I'm Paul Cradle. Welcome back to the show, everybody.
Yes, good to see you, Paul. How are you?
Good to see you again, Miles. Um, so we have not spoken in person since the last show, and I think we're intending to do that so that nothing really slips out that's more candid that doesn't get on the show. So this is basically like a conversation between friends also. But I
That's right.
understand something rather newsworthy, if you could say the least, has been happening to you. And obviously, you're in one piece. Well, actually, I'm not sure you're in one piece, but I don't think you've suffered any injuries. So, what has been going on over there? If you would like to share where you are and what's been going on, and what have you been through so far?
Yes, absolutely, Paul. Well, as we said in the last episode, it's been a pretty difficult and challenging time over here in the Levant. So, for those who don't know, I am located in Israel. Now, of course, the mere mention of that name will be controversial for many. Uh,
Especially
yeah,
now.
I'll get you the pool in a moment, okay? כן, כי יש לי פשוט פגישה עכשיו, אוקיי? שקט, בסדר? כן. האם זה בסדר או לא? אבל אני לא
Miles has a
מבין את זה.
kid. Miles has a kid he's negotiating something with in what's that language? Hebrew.
Yes. It's so it's yeah, the what we've gone through here is quite harrowing. I mean, to say the least. Now, of course, one can say similar things for those in Iran as well, on the ground, civilians. It's a very complicated story. I think that ultimately, though, despite what you will hear by many factions that are against Israel, uh, which I believe are primarily for anti Semitic reasons, I'm sad to say, although those camps vociferously claim that it's not because of anti Semitism. But that, of course, is the face of modern anti Semitism. It's that anti Semitism which denies that it is anti Semitism. Whereas in the past, more classical anti Semitism generally featured anti Semites who were either proud to be anti Semites, that they openly admitted thereto, or there was just no perceived contradiction at all. Uh, in being an anti-Semite and being an ethical person, so there was no reason to hide it. But nowadays, in our own time, when being called an anti-Semite is a bad word, nobody wants to be called that, even if definitionally they are. So this is the modern face of that. But the general gist is that Israel, with all of its imperfections, is in essence a democratic country that has the rule of law. Iran, on the other hand, is not. It is a dictatorship, an Islamist dictatorship, uh, which is in large part a theocracy. And moreover, there are no rights if you are homosexual. Obviously, if you're a woman, there are many serious problems within the society. And I have a good friend here who fled from Iran as a refugee, and he has been here. Um, he had to flee under threat of death. They'll hang you from trains. So it's not symmetrical warfare. That's one thing that has to be understood. That the general issue is that for many decades since 1979, with the Islamic Revolution in Iran, after the Shah was no longer the ruling head, uh, a very uh, sort of extremist Islamist ideology took over the country and has ruled with an iron fist ever since. Now, starting from around that time, the regime started calling the United States the Great Satan or the Big Satan, and calling Israel the Little Satan. Um, and the the avowed sort of goal of this regime, among other things, is to destroy Israel and America. Now, of course, Israel seems to take a special interest for the regime because so much of their ideology is informed by institutionalized and systemic virulent anti Semitism, um, which is theological and not merely ideological, but it is both. So it has a particular strength and we'll say vitality, for lack of a better word. I mean, they really feel it. I mean, they really feel it in the depths of their soul. Um, so Israel has no reason or will to destroy Iran. In fact, we were good friends, well, more or less, before 1979 under the Shah. Um, so it's not symmetrical. We're not interested in destroying them. We just want to live in peace, but they absolutely want us to be devastated unto complete and utter desolation and demolition. And of course, while prior to these full head-on direct assaults of the last week or two, 3 weeks, um, it was primarily indirect. So Iran set up all these proxies, or in some way influenced them to sort of attack us. So there were all these Iranian proxies. We're talking about Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, which all surround Israel. Some in Lebanon, some in the Gaza Strip, the Houthis in Yemen. So you see from all sides, we have been attacked for decades essentially by endless rockets, and also from within. So it's a very complicated issue, but ultimately, despite what is said, Israeli policy and Israeli action reflects a defensive approach. And even when offensives are taken, is primarily preemptive. Now, I understand there's so many people who are going to hate on me for these kinds of comments because the anti-Israel mob are in full swing right now, and you can't get anything into their heads, unfortunately, anything new. The cognitive dissonance is extreme. Uh, anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is just to give you a background. So we understood through very good intelligence that Iran was planning to attack Israel with its long developing nuclear capabilities. At some point, it was believed that they would have the ability to construct a bomb in short order, which obviously is an existential threat, especially for such a small country as our own. So what Israel did, based on this intelligence, is to launch a preemptive attack on Iran, which is unprecedented. I mean, we've had, we'll say, spats in the past, but nothing like this. I mean, Israel went in full swing, took out major players within the regime, major leaders of the regime through targeted airstrikes. So the IAF, or the Israeli Air Force, they took out military installations, nuclear facilities, pretty heavy airstrikes. we don't actually know the full damage as of yet. I mean, some say it's quite heavy, others say it's not as much as is claimed. But in any case, it does seem like it set back their program significantly, one hopes. And then, moreover, at a certain point, the United States entered the assault, understanding the threat that Iran poses as a potential nuclear power. You don't want to have nuclear power in the hands of a dictatorial regime such as theirs, bent on American and Israeli destruction. So the decision was made, some say unilaterally, by Trump. Of course, this is much more complicated because even with what happened, it's not exactly unilateral. I think the people think that everything is just these figureheads, like it's Bibi or it's Trump or it's this leader or that leader. It's much more complicated than that. There are still checks and balances. I mean, obviously, there are people in the United States who believe that they literally live under a dictatorship, but I mean, they have no idea what it's really like to live in a dictatorship. I mean, you and I have actually lived in a dictatorship before in China. So we know I mean, obviously China is a little bit more complicated than that as well, but I mean, that's a much closer than even what's happening in the United States right now. I mean, this is a favorite, I think, exaggeration of some section of the American people at the moment to believe that they literally live under a dictatorship. But if they only knew what it was really like to live under a dictator, they might rethink that exaggeration. So anyway, my point is though that this decision was made, and then America entered the war. They dropped what are called bunker busters. Really, the only country that's capable of doing this on three major sites in Iran, nuclear sites: Esfahan, Natanz, and Fordow. So these three sites are major nuclear sites within Iran, and then I believe some of them were attacked again via Israeli airstrike. Now, some claim that only America could have taken these out with bunker busters because, some of the major workings of these sites occur very deeply underground, and so it was believed that these bunker buster bombs would be needed to cause any damage whatsoever because they're so deep. However, there are many analysts who believe that Israel would have been able to compromise these sites via ground forces if America had decided not to join the war. So for all these people who say that we couldn't have done anything by ourselves, completely wrong. But it is nice to have support. Unfortunately, there are now people, of course, who believe the insane belief that there is no point in attacking at all. Like how dare you attack a sovereign nation? And I understand why some uninformed people might think that. But this is the question. If you have a neighbor who vows to murder you at the soonest possible opportunity, what do you do? Do you do nothing because it is against the law to do something, or do you preempt? Now, obviously, if it's between two neighbors, you could flee and change your identity. You can't do that as a country. I mean, Israel can't pack up and then disappear into some other country. I mean, you can't move the land. So basically, there's no choice but to defend from where you are and to take a stand on your stead. And so that's what had to be done. I mean, I don't think people realize what it's like to live under existential threat. If you live in Israel, especially if you're born here, you grow up with that feeling, knowing that constantly fighting for your very existence. So that's just to give you some background of what happened. Now, in terms of, aside from the politics of it or the military considerations of it, which are very complicated, what we actually went through on the ground, both us Israelis and Iranian civilians in Iran, it was a harrowing almost 2 weeks. We're talking about every day airstrikes pretty much in Iran, and here in Israel, huge ballistic bombardments, hundreds of ballistic missiles sent from Iran, primarily into civilian areas, or at least many of them made it into civilian areas. Now, luckily, we have very good air defenses. So the grand majority of these projectiles were intercepted in midair before they had a chance to hit. But some made it through because these are just numerous volleys and salvos. And the ones that come through, and we're talking about huge missiles with massive warheads hitting residential buildings in many cases. So I mean, if you look at the devastation, it's pretty shocking. Um, so there are many thousands of people who are no longer able to live in the apartments that they were previously living in. We're talking about over, I think it's 12,000 or more people, if I'm not mistaken, who have been displaced. Uh, it was about, last time I checked, it was about 29 people were killed in these attacks. Um, So the issue, of course, is the Iranian regime claims way, way more people killed. Israel says that the majority killed are people who are affiliated with the military or they were nuclear scientists working towards a nuclear bomb. Uh, I mean, probably there are civilians as well. I mean, it's an unfortunate thing, of course, but this is the reality of war, unfortunately. I mean, I knew this myself, even when we were at risk of being attacked here, of dying in these salvos from Iranian missiles. I was still in favor of the war effort because I knew that as bad as what we're going through in this moment, if Iran had just been allowed to continue on the path that it was on, the alternative would have been far worse. Them dropping, a much worse weapon, you can imagine. So that's sort of the feeling you have, that even as you're sitting in your bomb shelter and you're hearing these gigantic booms that are shaking your building and going, you can, and you wanna like go outside and see the show in a way, like very macabre, sort of, um what's that, the name of that urge in French where you like it's the call to the abyss, where you have like a sudden urge to jump off a cliff even though you don't really want to do it, or the urge to the call to the void, I think it's called, in English, something like that. And I don't know, have you heard of that, Paul, by the way, the call to the void?
Sounds familiar.
Like, have you ever had that feeling where you're standing at a really high height and you just have this sudden urge to jump off, even though you wouldn't actually do it?
No.
You haven't, okay.
No,
Or
I might just experiment with sitting at the edge, but leaning back so I won't fall over.
yeah, yeah, that's different. But like, what about, have you ever been on a bus going around like careening corners and you have like a macabre vision of what if the bus, slammed over the edge and went tumbling down the cliffside? Like, have you ever had thoughts of those kinds, of that kind?
Uh, no, I can't say I have. As strange as that may seem, I'm
It's
afraid, I'm genuinely afraid of it.
Oh
Genuinely,
yeah, well, that's the thing. Most people who have the experience, the so-called call to the void, I believe it is, they genuinely fear those outcomes, but it's like an uncontrollable instinctual urge. I mean, it doesn't mean you're self-deleting, or that you're was cogitating self-deletion. It's not at all that. It's you wouldn't actually do it. You don't actually intend to do it. It's just a almost a compulsive thought, but it's very common and it seems to be pretty healthy. Uh, it's pretty well documented. I mean, we can talk about this phenomenon in another time because I think it's actually a very fascinating topic. But my point in all this is that I had this sort of call to the void type experience where I wanted to go out of the shelter and like go out to the balcony and see I want to see these rockets falling, but or these missiles falling. But of course, that's one of the stupidest things you can do because I believe, yeah, definitely the majority of the people who perished were people who did not go into a bomb shelter. The majority of people who were in bomb shelters and their building was hit survived. Uh, with a very small minority of exceptions. So it's truly dicing with death if you leave your shelter on during an attack of this kind. Um, and now we're very used to this in Israel. I mean, we've had rocketry from all sides, but we're talking about smaller scale rockets, things that, while still deadly, if you're inside of a bomb shelter, for example, you're probably going to be okay. But when we're talking about these gigantic, massive, war-headed Iranian missiles, completely different story. This is something that's unprecedented here. I mean, we've never, as civilians, dealt with a war force of that kind. I mean, on the one hand, it wasn't as extreme as we may have feared. But on the other hand, what we did experience was a sheer fear that I can't really put into words. You're with your kids and you hear these gigantic warheads exploding all around you, tearing your neighborhood to bits. It's pretty terrifying. And I mean, for the first time, I could hear, as I said in the last show, buildings just, I could hear the rebar and the cement popping and cracking from within the general boom sounds themselves. I'm very used to hearing boom sounds, but never have I heard the nuances of cracking metal and cement from within the boom. I mean, this was like an up close and personal experience of the inner anatomy of a boom. So it means it was quite close, very, very close to where we were. And I think it pretty much almost missed us because I saw damage down the street pretty much, a few blocks away. And so, yeah, well, it's like Russian roulette. And again, like I understand people in Iran also went through great terror as well. So I mean, it's I think that Israel has no problem with the Iranian people. It has a problem with the the radically anti-Semitic regime that runs Iran and also persecutes its own people. So, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. Now, there are going to be people watching this and saying, what about you're talking about all this suffering that you went through? What about Gaza? Well, it's a very good question, but ultimately, the Gaza war never would have happened had October 7th not been visited upon Israel in the first place. And the Gaza war, what's happening there, is the result ultimately of Iran sponsored radical anti Semitism. If you strike radical anti Semitism from your hearts, there will not the Israeli retaliation. The Gaza war and what people are claiming, what they're claiming worse things about this war. It's not merely a war. They say, they say it's a deletion of a people. I mean, it's this is not reflected in Israeli policy nor in Israeli action. If you actually look at the data, unless of course you're looking at the data that's being peddled by the Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas, the very group that was heavily involved, primarily the primary party involved in October 7th, which was mass deletion. Uh, you know, basically because I think it was driven primarily by radical anti-Semitism. So this is the issue. I mean, Hamas and its allies within Gaza, they use the civilian population there as human shields, and that's the primary reason for the casualty rate that there is in the Gaza Strip during this war. And it's upon that basis that they make these charges of deletion of a people. But it's really a Holocaust inversion. No Israeli is happy, or very few are happy about casualties on the other side. The Jewish way, you don't want people to die. But again, it comes back to this question, if your enemy is threatening to kill you and you have reasonable reason to believe that they're going to delete you, what do you do in response? Do you sit back and do nothing? Do you try and resort to diplomacy, which has, by the way, been tried here over and over and over and over again to no effect? Or it ends up going, down a path that's far worse than how it was prior to the diplomacy? Or you can preempt, which is what we did regarding Iran. And regarding Gaza, this was not a preemptive strike, unfortunately. I mean, you can only imagine what the response had been had we done so. But this was essentially a defensive war after a major people deletional invasion into our sovereign country. There are so many oppositions to this, Paul. I mean, this is such a complicated history here that everything I'm saying, I can imagine all the responses that anti-Israel activists would have to what I'm saying. I mean, I've seen it all. I've seen it all at this point. And I want to familiarize you and maybe some of our audience with that at a later time. I'm just trying to give you a general sense of what we experienced on the ground here without getting into the full history, which it would be interesting to do so later on. But I think it's sort of a matter of, bit by bit rather than, giving you the full smorgasbord mukbang, right now. Let's do it, bit by bit. So any questions, or is that sort of, does that give you a general idea?
So, were you exposed to any real or perceived danger besides that one incident where you heard the rebarb and concrete cracking? What's been
Yeah,
going
I mean,
on
like,
most recently?
absolutely. I mean, we were in peril of losing our lives for about 2 weeks every day. That was just one occurrence that I'm bringing up as an example because I think it was probably the closest call, but I'm not certain. But every other day, almost every other day, we were enduring oncoming ballistic salvos, where we could hear tremendous booms and cracks, thrashing, thunderous booms and explosions all around us for days on end. I mean, you never knew when it was going to come. And when the sirens go off, meaning that you have to go find shelter within a very short time, you don't have much time. I mean, you better make it to shelter. So it's very. So I do apologize for the screaming children. I mean, you can see it's kind of back to the routine already. They're speaking Russian and Hebrew. Um, so yeah, so yeah, we were in danger of our lives
Mhm.
every single day of that, and we still are. I mean, it's not that that's changed exactly, but during this so-called ceasefire, um, it's a little sorry. This is
So do you know anyone in your community who has been maimed or who perished?
yeah, we know people,
Anyone close to
and
you?
I mean, I wouldn't. They're not like family members, but people that around the community. Uh, it's a pretty small country, so it's either like somebody, or somebody who knows somebody, or somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, you hear every day. It's not just what happened here, but it's also soldiers falling in combat in Gaza and elsewhere. Um, you know, co people that you study with, people that you work with, neighbors. I mean, it's impossible
Right.
not to be touched by it in some way. And obviously there are great losses, in the other on the other sides as well. But again, none of this would have happened if people stopped attacking Israel. I mean, that's basically all you have to do in order not to die is to stop attacking us. Um, So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the general rule of thumb, but apparently that doesn't go down very easily for people who are ideologically possessed and brought up and inculcated to believe that the only worthwhile goal is to die a martyr in pursuit of Jewish deletion, which is unfortunately the reality in Gaza from birth up through the full education system. This is what they learn in school. I mean, can you imagine that? Teaching 3-year-olds that this is the highest goal that you can achieve in your life. Um, I mean, I'm sure there are other goals as well, but that's one of the primary ones. Um, and of course, uh, there are terrorists who receive pay for martyring themselves in this way. Their families, that is, get stipends essentially for the rest of their lives, to my understanding. So it's sponsored on a state level. I mean, it's not a state, but I mean on within their own administrative, we'll say like non-sovereign government, because essentially Gaza was a de facto separate country, and so is um, the part of the so-called West Bank or Judea and Samaria, which is administered by uh, the Palestinian Authority. So it's very complicated here. I mean, again, I can envision every single word I say. I can imagine people taking issue with what I just said, because um, the this whole story, this whole chapter of world history is so full of what I would call unmerited controversy, um, because it really is very strange. It's like the Jewish people want to have a connection. They want to live in their indigenous ancestral homeland, which is Israel. Now, as if any proof were needed, it's well demonstrated by genetics, archaeology, linguistics, and other sciences that show without a doubt the Jewish connection to Israel. And it's also the people with the oldest provable connection to this land for a people that is still extant. Obviously, there are even more ancient peoples, but they no longer are extant. Um, Now, there are other peoples who live here, and the project of Zionism was never about trying to remove them or trying to do something worse, even though during wars certain things have happened in what I believe is in self-defense primarily. Although obviously there have been some occasions where the lines are blurred, and I think that Israel has gone to great lengths to address that, under uh, military law, or that is to say that we punish our own when we believe something untoward has happened in the line of battle. But I think that it's pretty rare, despite the claims to the contrary, and also to the claims that the entire infrastructure, the military, the government, the entire enterprise is corrupt and evil from top to bottom. I mean, this is one of the most common claims. You're going to have issues in any government, in any army, but this is
Less than 1 minute now,
oh,
Miles.
I ended up talking about this for the whole time. I apologize, Paul. It's
But
just
it's
we're
happening to
very
you. It's there's nothing going on here, Miles. So,
well. There's
you
some stuff.
know,
There's some things going on in the Philippines.
well, I mean, there's always something going on anywhere, but
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
I go to the store every day. There's no missiles. There's nobody's.
You get
Although I
aisles.
am, I am in constant extant danger. I am. I am in existential. I suffer existential threat more than well,
Yes.
but maybe not much more than I would in a major U.S. city. When you consider
Yeah, it's a
crime,
good
when you
question.
consider just indiscriminate crime, who knows? I might be safer here with an existential threat.